we're not seeing people recruited. We're seeing people invited into the Great Commission. I think that's what one of the things training does, inviting people into the Great Commission and watching them obey the Lord in that. We want to see that there's a calling on their life from the Lord that is usually met with sacrifice. It's going to cost something. There's character that is affirmed, but especially under duress, the duress of ministry and the hardships that this kind of work brings, and that their competency in doing 0 to 1 pioneering work, networking, training, that they're growing into that. And then lastly, they're the community, like they have relationships around the work. And so it's been amazing to watch the fruit of that in a number of places, where anyone from a teenager like my kids, or Ross Ramsey's kids, or a number of kids across the U.S. they're obeying the Great Commission, and they're getting to run after that in community.
You give a story.
Maximilian. We're at the skate park with our kids in Southern California, and this 19-year-old hippie pro skater has got this T-shirt that's got scripture on it, and I'm watching my kids skate, and I'm like, hey man, nice shirt. And he thought I was making fun of him, so he sits down and he shares the gospel with me. And so I was like, hey man, like, we love the Lord. He's like, me too, man. I said, we love to make disciples and help people start churches and just obey the Great Commission. And he said, I have been praying and fasting for God to lead me to a community where I could learn how to plant churches. And he's like, I've been a believer. I think he'd been a believer for just under a year, and he had led 11 people to faith. He's like, I want to know how to disciple, and I want to know what to do with those people. So we didn't recruit them. We invited them. Like, hey man, walk with us. What time tomorrow you want to get together? So we met up for coffee, and by that time in Southern California, there was a church meeting almost every night somewhere. And so we got in the Word together, but then we would visit a different church each night in a home. And he was seeing the 3/3, format, and he's seeing like the fruit. He's seeing new believers like participating in leadership roles within the 3/3. He's seeing them get together outside of the gathering, to share the gospel, to get in the Word together, to disciple. He's watching all this play out, so he's learning, in community. And then I think the next week he wanted to go down to a city like it's about an hour south, and so we went down with him to Oceanside, and he led some guys to Christ, and my sons, Malachi and Isaiah, were like, hey man, like, you got to follow them, you got to walk with them. He's like, oh, that's right. So they trained him in the 411 and commands of Christ, and we would go back down and walk. And so I don't know, after I think it was like maybe a month or two of that, he just felt compelled by the Lord that he was supposed to go back to Phoenix. And so Maximilian went back to Phoenix, and he led his twin sister to faith. And he began to gather some of those people that he had shared with before. And based on what he had learned, from Zeal and other churches in LA, he went and he started with the 411, the commands of Christ, using a tool like the church circle to just discover ecclesiology from Acts 2. And they started a church in his home. It's called Laborers Church. And so Max just does the hard work of 0 to 1 networking and training in Phoenix. And within a few months, he's got, I think, 4 other churches that multiplied out of that. And God brought Bruce and Caleb into his life. He started, it's like when we have needs, it's like, what do you do? It's like, well, he was praying and fasting, and God provided that. So he learned that, like, hey man, he's like, I really want some other leaders. I got a lot of heavy lifting with some new disciples. So he prayed and fasted, and God brought Bruce and Caleb into his life as a father and son, who were really trying to learn how to make disciples and start churches like they see in the New Testament. And that brought a ton of lift to them. And so they got other churches that are starting to begin to form around Phoenix, and a number of Caleb was a student at GCU, and so now they're starting to see some college kids. They got like a a pipeline for leaders, if you will, out of that college campus. And it's a lot of Gen Z people, and then their parents. It's kind of like what happened at Zeal. Their parents and their grandparents and their siblings are like, man, I see what's going on in your life. I want to be a part of that, So you got parents and grandparents involved, and so then fast forward, he marries Sydney. He gets a wife out of this, and a year later, they feel compelled to follow some relationships across the country. So Max and Sydney get in their van. They get some. It was funny. They got some strategy funds that were provided for them, and to help just cover gas and stuff, and they went to multiple cities. I think they went to Colorado. They went to New Orleans. They went to Florida. They went all around the U.S. They went up to Michigan to the skate conference there and all along the way they're doing 0-to-1 networking and training, and leaving behind either disciples or bands or believers that are trained. And so yeah, they were invited into the Great Commission, and then somewhere along the lines, I'm watching that they're clearly called. I'm seeing their character develop. I'm saying Max and Sydney now, like as a married couple, just phenomenal. I'm seeing the competencies, really be developed, and then the community, like they've got multiple people that they could lean on, and then they let us know, like, hey, I think that the Lord might be calling us to go after Europe, and we were also praying along the same line. So I was like, hey, let's follow the Lord out there. So, but before they went, we saw those 4 things in their lives really accomplished. So they're coming over as leaders in Europe, really trying to drill down into Athens and help jump in on the Europe strategy. And so I don't know, that'd be one example of where we're seeing, like, whether they're young or old, like people being invited into the Great Commission, pursuing no place left, and then getting what they need to accomplish the vision God's called them to. And there's a movement of, I don't know, you should get an interview with them, but they've got, I know they have at least 3, if not 4 generations of churches in Phoenix. And through their Woodcosts, their relational network, they met a girl that's out here in Greece who has a vision to see 1,000 churches multiply across Greece. And so they've been training and started running with her. So it's like, even through the oikos there, if we talk about movement to mobilization, where we're seeing, movements, and at least God's the one who starts movements, but if we can follow what we see in the Bible and begin to do the rhythms of what we see in the scriptures, and orient our lives around this work, when God does move over here on this part of the world, out of that we can see laborers and bands that can go to targets that have those, the calling, the character, the competency, and then the community to really thrive in the field. One of the blessings in that story too, Steve, or just the example of Max and Sydney, is just the impact it's had on my own kids. Like, we've been raising our kids in this, and God brought Max into our lives, and it was such a gift to Malachi and Isaiah to have somebody a little bit older, a little bit further along in life, to run with them. Isaiah, now he's finishing up his last semester, and he has spent a season running in the work with Maximilian. They've gone to Italy together, they've gone to England together, they've gone to Germany together, they've gone to a number of countries together. And so now to see, a Gen Z person not only living out the work, but also mentoring others that are coming up. And when I watch these guys go into, not just in the U.S., but to other places in Europe, other people their age, older and younger too, but they're like, okay, like, you're living out what I see here. I can do that. It's like a living vision cast, so the normal barriers to keep young people from obeying the Great Commission. It's just like, oh, these guys are a living example. I want to do that. Can you show me what to do?
Yeah.
To where now, like Isaiah is finishing up, and he's seen some cool things in the States. He saw the Lord. He got to baptize a number of friends and walk with them in discipleship and see a church get started with some friends in Southern California that's multiplied. They got to go over to be with you guys in Australia, New Zealand, and cast some vision. Him and Noah got to cast some vision to a bunch of church planners in Australia and New Zealand. So then he's coming into Europe, having seen all that fruit, and now it's like the relationships are not there yet. He's learning the hard part of starting over, and he's like, man, I just really want disciples. I was like, Isaiah, what you got to experience in Ambassadors, was the fruit of 8 years of obedience and labor, and then as the Lord called him away. So to get to come out here and then have Maximilian walk with him in mentorship and discipleship in Europe, and to have the option to graduate and then to go serve with Rick and Jenny in Central Asia for a semester. It's a dream. I think this is the picture of when we say movement to mobilization, is that there's an alignment in those 4 things I talked about earlier, to where you can jump right into the work, and it's along the lines of vision and relationship. So I don't know. That's just some examples from our own lives personally. That one of the things that hit me when I moved over here, I've got a good friend of mine, Taylor. He's an entrepreneur. He was an NPL guy from Auburn. He lives in South Florida now and is an entrepreneur. And he's a brilliant, he's a thinker, man, and he's a process guy. And so as we're kind of interacting on our strategy here in Europe, he said, hey, Troy, you've moved from LA to Europe. Are you seeing that as a startup or as an expansion? I think from business terms. And I was like, when I first moved out here, I saw Europe as a startup, but I'm realizing it's an expansion. And when I moved from Florida to California, I saw it as a startup, not an expansion. And here's what I mean by that. It was we got sent out of Florida, the relationships I was coaching across the U.S., and it was well intentioned. It was like, I got to drill down in L.A. And it was the right thing to do. But I think completely saying I've got no time or budget to stay involved, and to basically, I think what I would have done, I would have included some on my calendar and on my budget, having the guys in South Florida come out within the first couple of years, bring some Timothys, and jump into 0 to 1 networking and training with us out there. We went out with Rick and Puck, so we came as a band, as a mob, but I think it would have been helpful to have them come from Florida, Puck's guys come from Boone, Rick's guys come from Jacksonville, and enter into that work with us, maybe once or twice a year. It's not like every month.
Yeah.
And then vice versa. We go back to those places with some Timothys, around 0 to 1 networking and training. 0 to 1, just pioneering. And this strengthens both sides, and we, to some extent, we teamed up with the Utah guys, with Matt and Tyler and Logan and those guys. And that really helped us there locally. And so it wasn't like there wasn't any of that. And we definitely had people come in. You came in, we had a number of people come in from other places to speak into things, but I think it was all going in one direction. We weren't, and so I think when we talk movement to mobilization and the Great Commission pipeline, I think part of my role as an SC or a laborer that gets sent is I need to include in my calendar and in my budget some intentional activities with people from those places around 0 to 1 networking and training. So I had that aha, and when my buddy Taylor asked me that question, and so we started to, I was like, okay, when I have an opportunity to go back to the States, I need to maximize that time and get to those places and cast vision for gaps, learn from what God is doing, and invite people around 0 to 1 networking and training. So I was just in LA, man, I got to interact with the band that's there. Like Kyle Pearson has come in and brought so much just lift and clarity, thinking through targets. He's holding the map across the city. JT and what God's doing through that Neighbors and Nations network and the vision that they have. Really, JT has been really thinking through just catalytic coaching calls that have formed to apostolic banding, and just what does that look like? I mean, one of my big takeaways was they're like, hey man, the apostolic band does not have to be a church together. I think when you're going into new areas, like, you don't have a choice, but it just allows people to come from different networks and band together. I thought that was an aha takeaway for me. But they've been doing some rhythms and activities around, large, like, area at bands and local bands that were really insightful. Another thing they're doing is there's emerging, because at Zeal they've appointed elders, and so I was just asking, like, what are the elders in those churches doing, and how are you, serving and supporting those guys, like, and so they've got like similar. They have like a shepherd band. I mean, they've got some calls for shepherds, but they've got like a Barnabas couple that goes around and encourages, the shepherds within their network. And so I'm learning from what's going on in there, because as we're still kind of there's a lot of stuff God's doing in Europe, but the work that we're affiliated with is newer, and they're kind of encouraged about what's going on in LA. And so I'm going back and I was like, man, it's like there's even more, and it's more developed, and they've got new insights. And so if I just said see ya, I'd miss out on the lessons learned. And the guys in Europe are only hearing it from my perspective. When I'm having them come out and swarm with us or network with us or pioneer with us, like, these guys are able to speak into, and then we got these relationships formed. So another thing that's happened as we've, with movements and mobilization in mind, is we had some folks from LA come out and NRM with us, non-resident missionaries. So they're coming out and swarming with us. We did like a missionary journey in Poland, Czech Republic, and Germany. And it was, we were vision casting and we were training, and we were pioneering. So we were doing all those activities. And, Steve, it was amazing. Like, they're seeing a band operate together. And that was like, a number of them talked about it. Like, wow, we see not just what you're saying, but how you're saying it and the way you guys interact with each other, like the relationships that you guys have. And God's speaking through them. They're bringing fresh insights from what's going on over there. And, but it also kind of pokes some of them on the heart, like, hey, I think I might be called to come over here. And so, my daughter and her son, they came out a few times to help us with some work, and they have discerned the Lord's calling them to come and focus in on Europe and drill down in a global city. And, but see, now we're starting to see that Great Commission pipeline being formed, not out of recruiting, but out of invitation around vision and relationship. We also had a couple guys from Zeal, Tyler and Josiah, just two awesome guys, love the Lord. They both either had a job or students, and so they had the summer. So they came out 7 weeks, and the church that their Zeal helped raise some funds for them, and they came out on their own time and swarmed with us with Russell in the UK. They came out to Greece and swarmed. They went to Czech Republic and jumped in and served those folks. They went to Germany and did some swarming, and they spent their summer coming and doing the work of a missionary. And one of those guys is like, man, feel like the Lord might be like giving me a vision to go to New York City. Well, that's not a fail if they don't come to Europe, because it's not like we're not recruiting them. It's like, we want to steward what God's calling you to do, man. So here's some guys in New York City that you can connect with, and then that invitation is up to the guys in New York City. It's not up to me. I can't say, oh, you should go with them. It's like that has to come around the relationship, and the vision's got to match up. But so I don't know, like that's just the first year, but I'm watching this pipeline begin to be formed around movement to mobilization. We're in the middle of doing a 5-touch training rollout in the Frankfurt area. I got invited by Mateo, a good friend of mine from South Florida, who's currently in Germany. And Rick had said when we moved overseas, he's like, hey man, share the case study, share the story of what God did in LA. And it's like, so you don't want to just go like, hey, let me tell you what God did. It's God's work, so we can brag on him. But when you go into new areas, you're scum. And so we prayed for opportunities to be invited. And so we went out to spend some time with Mateo. He's like, hey man, would you share the case study? So we're in his living room, and me, Isaiah, Tessa, and Lucy. And there's probably 7 or 8 people that were there, a mix of some missionaries. In fact, one of my buddies, Andrew from Greece, was there. And I'm like, hey man. But there were some Germans that were there. And there's this big 6'5" German he heard the case study from LA, and he was just like, this is what Germany needs. He was so fired up. He's like, to hear this kind of story, like we see in the New Testament, from like the Western context, from a place like LA, it was just like, he's like, we need this. Will you please come out and share this? And so, I think a few months later, it was, and me, Isaiah, and then Jordan, and then mine, DJ, we went out there and we got to cast vision to a room full of mostly Germans, sharing the case study. But it was in 3D. It wasn't just me telling it. It was all of them telling it, and they were like representing different generations of churches on the case study. And afterwards, a number of them were like, can you teach us? Can you train us? Can you show us what, it wasn't just like, wow. It was like, okay, we want to do this. Can you show us what you did? We started a 5-touch training rollout, and we're swarming with like Kevin and Shannon Sweeney. They're awesome. They're at the IMB. They were with us in Riverside with Jordan for a season when they were stateside. Mateo and his band from Cologne. And so we're going to interact with, a number of folks. So, it's your standard 12-month training rollout that we've been using. I know not everybody uses it, but it's 401 commands of Christ. We model it, and then they do the commands. We come back 3 months later, and then we do a practice with them. We show them the trainer principles, and we assist them in leading their own, gospel conversations training with the 401 and the commands of Christ. And then they go do the same thing. Go share the gospel, train people in the 401 and the commands. We come back to 3rd touch, and we watch them lead it. And then it's like, all right, train it. And this is where we start to see the band begin to form, because in a traditional church or setting, like it's like, I've been to one once, why would I go to it again? But what you're looking for is, who are the people that really want to jump into the Great Commission work, in a pioneering setting? And then it's like, all right, run the play, go share the gospel, go train people. And then we come back 3 months later and we do an intensive, 4 fields intensive, really digging into principles. And they leave with a 3-year plan. Then we come back 3 months later and we do a mid-level, which is problem solving. And then they go into a coaching rhythm. So we've been doing that in Germany. And oh my gosh, Steve, like it's been incredible. Like to get to swarm with folks from the U.S., to get to swarm with laborers that are on the ground or in other parts of Europe. Like there's a hunger, and they're seeing it out of the New Testament. It's incredible. And I don't know, we can give a whole other update on Europe here soon. But one story I want to tell you related to the mobbing and the band piece. We were there for the 2nd touch. And Alex, who's a guy in Canada that runs NRM there in Germany, he said, hey, when you come back, could you do like a mini principles training on the front end? We're like, yeah. So we did it, and it was brilliant. Like, it was really helpful. So I was like, I invited Tyler Brown to come out with me because we've swarmed together a lot, and it was just encouraging to have him there as a friend. But man, he really spoke a lot of wisdom, and we're out to dinner with this with Ebron and Helen, awesome couple that are in V Spotted, and it's me and Tyler and Ebron and Helen. She's German, he's Pakistani, and there's this East German guy who's sitting at the restaurant, and we Tyler and Ebron go talk to him, and he ends up coming and sitting down with us, and so Helen shares the 3 circles. She's got a little sticker on her phone. She shares the 3 circles with him in German. And this guy says, I'm German. We don't believe this. And she's like, oh, have you heard this? He's like, I've never heard this before. He's like, I've never met a Christian before. And he's like, we're all atheists. And it was like, oh, that's interesting. So then he's kind of like watching us and interacting with us, and he's seeing like 2 Americans that are from different places, a German and a Pakistani that are married, and then Pakistani is like ministering to the Indian guy that owns the restaurant. So he's watching all this, and he's like, this is not how the world works, He's like, so he goes, how long have you guys known each other? Like, how do you guys know each other? So we just kind of shared like how we knew one another, and he was just like, this is interesting. And he goes, what is your purpose? And so we shared with him about like, the Lord, the gospel, the Great Commission, and how the Lord brought us together and what we're living our lives to do. And he's just like, huh. And so then like, I don't know, an hour later we're leaving, and he goes, how many are there of you? I was like, what, Christians? He goes, yeah. I said, millions. He's like, really? Huh. So we said, hey man, we're meeting again tomorrow morning at a cafe to talk strategy with some guys. You're welcome to come and join us. And he's like, I'm supposed to leave town, but I'll I'll see. Well, he shows up the next morning, and he's like, I've never met anybody like you guys. Like, and he's like, I changed my plans. And so then he meets a guy who just moved over from Mexico City, a Mexican guy who's there to reach, a hard people group there. And then another German, and he's just like, who are you guys? And he's like, I'm moving here in 3 weeks. And the local brother is like, hey man, when you come here, let us know. We'd love to help you find a place. And then Tyler split off with him and spent an hour really explaining the gospel to him from the Word, and just to really like drill down some clear truths from the Bible with him. And he comes back from that, and he's just like, you can just tell he's just kind of stunned. Well, he leaves. He comes back 3 weeks later. This new band that has formed around, from I mean, they knew one another, but they banded together around the local work there in V Spotted from the training. They receive him, help him get set up. Ebron does this missionary journey, and the guy goes with him, like as an East German lost guy, just kind of mobbing with this band. And so like that just really stood out to me, like what uniting around vision and relationship with clarity could do. And we're seeing this pipeline built from movement to mobilization.